Queen Nandi's hands trembled as she cradled her newborn son. Her heart skipped a beat, overflowing with love, yet sinking into an overwhelming terror. The child was too different. His skin was pale, like moonlight reflected on the surface of the water, his hair a silvery white, his eyes so deep they seemed to hold a secret she could not comprehend. The room was utterly silent. The midwives only dared glance at one another, none daring to utter a word. In the very moment that should have been her most complete happiness, Nandi felt her chest tighten as though she could not breathe. She knew that if the king saw this child, he would not listen to any explanation. To him, difference was the same as betrayal, and betrayal carried only one fate: death. Nandi bent down, tears falling to wet her baby's cheeks. In desperate whispers, she murmured, "What am I to do? Will love or fear decide your fate?" The torch flame flickered against the stone walls, casting long shadows as if they sought to swallow the entire chamber. The queen's heavy breaths blended with the creaking of the wooden floor, everything waiting for something beyond imagination. In Nandi's arms, the newborn stirred softly. But instead of joy, it sent stabbing pain through her heart with each beat. The child was too different. His pale skin gleamed under the golden firelight, stunning everyone present. His hair shimmered silver, like strands spun from moonlight. His eyelashes were as delicate as morning mist. His small face carried a fragile, almost otherworldly beauty. The midwives bowed low, their faces vacant, lips trembling. None dared to speak, for within them all arose the same fear. Was this a blessing from the gods or a curse? The air thickened. Only Nandi's ragged breaths and the pounding of her heart in her chest remained. She wanted to cry, but her tears surged backward, choking her instead. A moment that should have been sacred now turned into an abyss of dread. In her mind, the king's figure loomed, stern eyes, unyielding face, a voice that never accepted any truth beyond his own belief. A child like this, so far removed from the bloodline, would be judged as proof of betrayal. Nandi bent low, her cheek brushing against her baby's cold skin. In that instant, maternal love still flared powerfully, but it came bound with a mortal fear. She knew love alone could not shield the child from Kwame's wrath. Each passing second was like a blade suspended above their heads. From the corner of the room, Amara, the queen's most loyal servant, watched in silence. In the dim light, she saw the queen's shoulders tremble. Never before had Amara seen Nandi so frail. It was not only the sorrow of a mother, but also the fear of a wife in a palace where power always outweighed love. Nandi forced herself to think quickly. There could be no hesitation. With every minute that passed, the chance of concealing the truth grew slimmer. She drew in a deep breath, her lips cracked and dry, opening slightly. Her voice came out faint, yet firm like a final command. Take the child away from this place, tonight, before the king sets foot inside. Amara froze. Her heart clenched as the queen's eyes flashed with desperate resolve. She understood this was not only an order, but a cry for salvation. But how could a mother part from her own flesh and blood? Amara longed to object, to plead with the queen to reconsider, but the gaze filled with supplication and despair silenced every word. That night, beneath the full moon glimmering over the Niger River, Amara walked alone. The wind howled, carrying the sound of distant festival drums, mingling with the soft cries of the baby in the wicker basket. Her trembling hands clutched the basket, her heart heavy as stone. Tears streamed down, falling onto the thin cloth wrapped around the tiny body. When she reached the riverbank, Amara knelt. The water sparkled, mirroring the star-filled sky like countless eyes watching. She closed her eyes, whispering in despair, "River God, please save this child." Then, slowly, gently, she pushed the basket onto the calm current. The basket spun, bobbing with the waves. drifting farther from sight. Amara covered her mouth to stifle her sobs, her body shaking with anguish. Every step she took back toward the palace felt like treading upon 1,000 blades. She knew she had just witnessed the beginning of a destiny, and from that moment, no one could know where the river would carry the child. The palace chamber still held the scent of torches and herbs. Nandi lay motionless, eyes wide, staring at the ceiling. She heard the door close, knowing Amara had obeyed. A searing tear slid from the corner of her eye. She did not know if she had just saved a life or cast it into darkness with her own hands. That night, the moon shone bright in the sky, and the river whispered as if keeping a profound secret. Would that secret bring light or darkness to the kingdom of Obadara? Now then, my dear audience, stay tuned for a story that will leave you in awe. Take a second to like this video and subscribe, but only if you truly resonate with what I've shared here, and leave a comment below telling me where you're watching from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see people joining us from all over the world. Dawn spread over the kingdom of Obadara, laying down a fragile veil of mist, clear as a curtain that concealed the truths that had unfolded in the dark. The first rays of sunlight pierced through the lofty palm fronds, gilding the straw rooftops of the villagers' huts and illuminating the grand palace rising at the heart of the capital. Yet behind those walls, Queen Nandi's heart remained heavy, as if bound by invisible chains. She had just lost her own flesh and blood, and now, to preserve her life, she was forced to play her part in a theater of deception. Amara returned as the sky lightened. Her face was ashen after a night spent battling sorrow. In her trembling arms lay another newborn, its skin a healthy brown, its warm breath proof of true flowing blood. The child came from a poor village on the edge of the forest, where life was as fragile as a flame before the wind. Its young mother had died after a sudden illness, leaving behind a defenseless soul. In a moment of despair, Amara made her choice: to bring the baby to the palace, to fill the void left by the truth. Nandi received the child, her arms closed around it, shaking, yet resolute as though she was embracing an entirely new fate. When she gazed into its misty eyes, she could not hold back the lump in her throat. The baby was blameless. It had only just entered the world, already burdened with a role far too heavy. Yet by its very presence, Nandi could escape the death sentence destiny had prepared for her. The atmosphere in the palace shifted quickly. The drums thundered, horns blared long and triumphant, carrying the news throughout the stronghold. Ladies of the court, ministers, soldiers, and common folk gathered at the palace gates. Joy surged everywhere, radiant smiles, booming blessings echoing like waves. Then the decisive moment arrived. On the highest steps, Nandi appeared with King Kwame. In her arms was the legitimate prince the child Amara had brought back. Roars erupted like thunder, drums and gongs resounded until the very earth trembled. Kwame, clad in resplendent royal robes, raised his arm proudly, his resounding voice covering the square. "This is my son, the Prince Oba. From this day forth, my own flesh shall inherit the throne and lead Obadara into eternal greatness." The people were drunk with triumph. They danced, they sang, they beat their drums, their stamping feet joining the chorus of jubilation. Kwame's eyes gleamed with pride, utterly convinced of the bloodline resting in the queen's arms. But Nandi, beneath her radiant cloak, felt her heart pierced with every cheer. Each cry of celebration twisted into her chest like a blade, reminding her that somewhere beyond these walls, her true child was being carried away far, drifting into the unknown. Meanwhile, beneath the deep waters of the Niger, the wicker basket floated gently with the waves. The rising sun cast golden light upon the infant's silver hair. Tiny hands flailed within the narrow space, breaths faint yet stubbornly clinging to life. The river bore the child past rocky banks, through dense forests, far from its mother's arms, far from the triumphant drums resounding in the palace. In stark contrast to the exultation within the city walls, a fragile life had begun its wandering unseen by any soul. That child had no name, no place, only one unmistakable mark: pale, uncanny skin and silver hair that shone like moonlight, the very signs that had struck fear into the palace. Between two parallel worlds, one side, the throne destined for a substitute, the other, the uncertain fate of the Forsaken. This exchange, devised to conceal a secret, was in truth the seed of upheavals yet to come. As the people chanted the name of Prince Oba, Nandi stood still, a shadow of sorrow clouding her eyes. She knew one thing: no truth could remain buried forever. One day the river would return what it had carried away, and when that time came, the kingdom would be forced to face the curse she had set in motion the night before. Far downriver, Amara knelt in prayer. The wind whipped about her, the waves lapping at her feet as if to remind her that falsehood could never be washed away forever. But Amara had made her choice. She prayed only that the river god might shelter the child so that at the very least it would live. Elsewhere, the drums still thundered. The villagers still cheered the name of a prince who had no knowledge of his true fate. Amid the thin mist veiling the Niger River, the small wicker basket still rocked and drifted with the rhythm of the waves. Strange streaks of light rippled across the water, as though some mysterious power was rising from the depths of the river. Then suddenly, a radiant golden glow burst forth, spreading across the surface like 1,000 stars igniting at once. It was the appearance of Queen Yamoja, the mermaid goddess of the seas, whom the people of this land dared only whisper of in their most secret prayers. Yamoja rose from the crystal waters, her golden scaled tail shimmering with dazzling brilliance, the pearl crown upon her head radiating a glimmering halo, as if the entire river had stopped its flow just to behold her. Her eyes were as deep as the eternal ocean, fierce and gentle all at once, holding within them both sovereign power and boundless compassion. A fragile cry drifted from the basket, as delicate as a thread trembling in the wind. Yamoja bent down, her hands tender yet strong, and lifted the baby from the wicker cradle. Bathed in the golden aura, the child revealed an extraordinary form. Skin white as snow, hair gleaming silver beneath the moonlight, and eyes of startling clarity, shining as though they carried secrets from another world. In that moment, the goddess's heart faltered. She placed her warm hand upon the tiny chest, feeling the quivering heartbeat like a flame about to extinguish. A fragile soul, abandoned in the current of life, yet the light in those eyes awakened within her a miraculous faith. Yamoja understood this was no ordinary child. This was a gift of destiny. Without hesitation, she bent low and breathed a stream of magic into the infant's frail breath. A golden mist spread, enveloping the small body. The crying faded, replaced by serenity, as though the soul had been cradled by an invisible hand. The baby's eyes slowly opened, and the pupils glowed with a strange silver hue, luminous as moonlight reflected on a full moon tide. In that instant, magic was made manifest. The tiny legs suddenly shifted, dissolving into a glimmering silver tail, its radiant scales catching the morning light. Yamoja clasped the child tightly to her heart, and for the first time in centuries of ruling the deep waters, she no longer felt alone. She whispered, as if speaking to fate itself, "You shall be Malik, the child guarded by the light." From that moment, Malik was no longer an abandoned infant, but the son of a goddess. Yamoja carried him down into the resplendent palace beneath the Niger's depths, a place untouched by sunlight, yet aglow with pearls, corals, and countless shimmering sea creatures. That palace now echoed with laughter, with cries, with the warmth of a human soul. Malik grew within Yamoja's embrace, under the protection of the aquatic kingdom. The river nourished him with its purity. Fish swam about him like companions, and the golden light of the goddess became the lifeblood sustaining his heart. With each passing day, Malik revealed strange signs. The wondrous power of water obeyed his call, and the radiance of his eyes could pierce the deepest shadows. Yet it was this very difference that stirred whispers among the merfolk. They respected him as the goddess's son, yet within their gaze lingered a trace of unease. Malik was not like them, and one day the truth could not remain hidden beneath the river forever. Meanwhile, in the palace of Obadara, drums still thundered day and night in celebration of Prince Oba, the one believed to be the rightful heir. But beneath the waters, Malik grew within a world of enchantment. Two fates ran side by side, divided by a veil of secrecy, while every wave seemed to weave an invisible thread, pulling them closer together. Deep within, Yemoja knew the child she had raised could not belong to the waters forever. Some greater force was guiding him toward a destiny beyond even her reach. All she could do was nurture, protect, and await the coming of that destined hour. And so the river flowed on, carrying with it the whispers of time. The older Malik grew, the stronger the light within him became. Until one day, that light would tear through every veil of secrecy, leading him to the devastating truth. He was not only the son of a goddess, but also the lost prince of a human kingdom. From the very first mornings beneath the river, Malik radiated difference. The golden coral palace where he lived gleamed like a dreamlike kingdom. Arching reefs glowed in shimmering light, endless strings of pearls hung suspended in the deep blue water, and countless schools of fish drifted around like moving stars. In that magical realm, Malik did not grow up alone. Always beside him was Zola, the princess of Queen Yemoja, with her flowing aquamarine hair and a smile as pure as breaking waves. Together they roamed the underwater kingdom, sometimes swimming across fields of swaying seaweed, sometimes playing with dolphins or singing under vaulted waters. Malik could sense every vibration of the waves, every breath of the sea creatures. And then, a strange power began to reveal itself. With just a gentle touch on an injured fish, the tear in its scales would close. When coral broke, his hand upon it restored it, more radiant than before. The people of the sea revered him as the child of miracles. Whenever he passed, eyes of reverence and hope followed, as though his very existence was a promise of a radiant future for the entire underwater realm. For Yemoja, that pride was mingled with worry. She knew the brighter the power shone, the harder it would be to hide it from the eyes of destiny. Meanwhile, on the land above, another child also grew, but upon a completely opposite path. Prince Oba, the baby once exchanged in fate, now lived in the vast palace of Obadara. Indulged endlessly by King Kwame, nourished by power and flattery, Oba soon became arrogant, cold, his heart closed tight, unable to find warmth in true love. The people of the kingdom whispered with sorrow in their eyes, "This prince does not carry the light, he carries darkness." Oba grew amidst false cheers, surrounded by hollow applause. With every passing day, the distance between him and the people widened. While Malik healed wherever he touched, Oba brought heaviness and gloom wherever he went. One world nurtured by love, another by power, the two marched in parallel, neither aware that the threads of destiny were tightening between them. The older Malik grew, the brighter the light within him became. He not only carried an unusual appearance, but also a gentle, compassionate heart. When the sea raged, he stood upon the reef, arms outstretched to calm the currents. When creatures were hurt, he healed them. When Zola buried her face in tears for the loss of a beloved dolphin, Malik held her in his arms until sorrow dissolved into the flow of water. That heart he had received from Yemoja, who had raised him with unconditional love. Oba, meanwhile, gazed upon the future throne as though the world were a battlefield. He believed love was weakness and that power alone was eternal. His eyes grew darker, no longer reflecting light, but blazing with ambition. King Kwame was proud, but the people drew further away. These two children, both born of a truth concealed, were growing up in two cages. One, golden and radiant beneath the sea. The other, cold and splendid within the palace. Neither knew which cage truly imprisoned them, and which cage might give wings for destiny to soar. Time passed, each rolling wave like a new chapter of fate turning. Malik began to dream strange dreams, visions of a throne shrouded in darkness, a thunderous drumbeat from the land above, and a face uncannily like his own but with eyes of ice. Each time he awoke, his heart grew heavier, as though part of his soul was being pulled elsewhere. On land, Oba often gazed into the mirror and shuddered suddenly. In the depths of his eyes, for a fleeting moment, he saw a radiant white light pass and then vanish. He did not understand, but Oba felt it clearly. Somewhere out there, another existed in parallel, and that light threatened his place. Beneath the river and upon the land, two souls, one of light, one of darkness, were moving toward an inevitable meeting. And when the truth was revealed, when the two fates collided, which world would shatter? Do you think you can guess what will happen next? Take a moment, comment the number 1, or say, "I'm still here," to continue listening. That night, the sky of Obadara was black, as though shrouded in a mourning veil. At the peak of the tallest tower, the ceremonial flame flickered, yet it could not dispel the unease seeping through the palace. King Kwame sat alone in his study, shoulders heavy, his eyes weighed down by 1,000 shadows. For so long, he had tried to convince himself that Oba was the rightful heir, yet every gesture, every glance from his son only planted deeper seeds of doubt in his heart. Never once, in Oba, had he seen that warm light the ancient prophecy had promised. The room was silent, save for the rustle of old parchment under his hand. Among his treasury lay dozens of scrolls stained with time, but only one was sealed with the royal crest from 2 centuries past. The oil lamp cast long, slanted shadows of the letters across the wall, and then he read the chilling words. Every 200 years, a child bearing the light of the divine will be born. It shall unite sea and land, bringing peace to all. If protected, the dynasty shall endure. If abandoned, darkness will flood the realm. The king's hand trembled. 200 years had passed, the prophecy had returned, and in shock he realized Oba could not be that child. Where was the light? Where was the promise? All he saw was emptiness in the cold gaze of his son. He sat in silence for hours, his heart clamped tight. Beyond the window, the wind howled through the long corridors like a call from the abyss. In his turmoil, he summoned the high priest, the spiritual master of the court. The aged man, cloaked in silver-white robes, entered the chamber, holding a staff carved with ocean waves. Without a word, the priest knelt and began the ritual to summon the divine. Incense smoke curled thick, and the flames in the bronze brazier suddenly shifted color from red to ocean blue. The entire chamber was engulfed in the breath of another world. The priest closed his eyes, murmuring words in ancient tongue, then slowly opened them, his voice echoing like wind rushing through mountain chasms. The child of light has been born, but it is not in the palace. It is beneath the river, under the protection of the Queen of the Seas. The room fell into deathly silence. King Kwame froze. This oracle was nothing less than a death sentence for his throne. The son he had raised, celebrated before his subjects, was not the chosen one. Meanwhile, a mysterious soul beneath the waters bore within it the power of light. A storm of fury erupted inside him. Sweat broke across his skin, but his eyes blazed red as fire. He felt not only betrayed, but threatened. If the truth spread, Oba would lose everything, and his throne would collapse into chaos. The power he had safeguarded his entire life now stood on the brink of crumbling to dust. Kwame sprang to his feet, pacing across the study, his steps striking the cold stone floor. He could not let fate slip through his grasp. If there was a child of light, he must claim it. Even if it meant war with the entire world beneath the sea, he would not relent. For it was not only the throne, but his honor, his royal bloodline itself that was being challenged. On the ebony desk carved with dragons and phoenixes, he spread out parchment and seized a quill. Each stroke of his writing was sharp as a spear, brimming with wrath. "Return, my son. If not, war shall come." When the red wax sealed and the royal crest was pressed down, the scroll became a silent dagger sent forth. Guards carried it to the banks of the Niger, casting it into the swirling waters. The small scroll drifted away, yet it bore the weight of hatred and the storm that lurked on the horizon. Beneath the river, where Malik still roamed carefree beside Princess Zola, the radiant kingdom of Coral had no knowledge of the challenge slithering toward them. Malik, the child of miracles, still laid his hand upon wounded fish, still smiled innocently, earning from the people the name Child of Wonder. But he did not know that very miracle was about to ignite the fire of war. At the ends of two worlds, one side held love, the other power. One child raised in light, the other in darkness. And now, the river did not merely flow, it was becoming the bridge to an inevitable confrontation. Beneath the deep blue ocean, where coral towers shone like hidden moons, the waves still lapped rhythmically around the palace of Queen Yamoja. Yet today, that shimmering light no longer brought peace. In her hands lay a scroll stained with red ink, the royal seal of the land engraved as sharply as a wound upon her heart. Those cruel words were not only a threat, but a tolling bell of fate. The secret she had hidden for 15 years was at last forced into the open. Malik entered, his eyes as bright and clear as the summer sea, unaware of the storm rising. He had just returned from the coral gardens, his hair still sprinkled with sea foam, his hands carrying the sweet scent of seaweed. He smiled upon seeing his foster mother, but that smile pierced Yamoja's heart. She knew in only a moment more that smile would shatter into irreparable pain. Yamoja slowly handed him the scroll. Her hands trembled, but her gaze remained resolute, as though she wished to pass every ounce of her strength into Malik. As his eyes ran over the lines of ink, his once radiant face fell, lips parting slightly in disbelief. And then, Yamoja's voice rose, steady yet trembling to its core. "My son, the time has come for the truth to be revealed. You are not of the blood of the sea. On that day, you were found in a cradle adrift upon the river. I could not turn away, so I took you in, raised you as my own." The chamber sank into silence. Malik was stunned, his eyes wide, his fingers trembling as he looked down at himself. The hands that had healed the wounds of countless creatures now seemed foreign, as though he no longer belonged to this place. Pain surged within him, but deep down, his heart screamed one thing. This sea was his family, and Yamoja was his mother. He lifted his head, tears brimming, yet his gaze burning bright like flame. Malik clutched her hand, shaking his head like a desperate child unwilling to lose his only anchor. No words escaped him, yet both understood. This was home, and the bond of motherhood had long surpassed blood. Meanwhile, on the land above, another earthquake shook the palace of Obadara. King Kwame, after reading the prophecy and receiving the oracle, locked himself in a storm of fury. Beside him stood Queen Nandi, the woman once seen as the gentle heart of the court, now silent as a shadow. For 15 years, she had buried a secret, believing it could be hidden forever. But now, beneath her husband's blazing eyes, her lips were forced to release the truth. Nandi trembled, her voice choked, as though pierced by 1,000 blades. That day, it is true our son was born with different skin. I panicked. I feared scorn, the eyes of the world, and I let him drift away with the river. The confession struck like lightning in the dark. Kwame leapt to his feet, his face flushed red, his eyes blazing fire. each word from his mouth cut like a blade. You are the one who destroyed the future of this kingdom. Rage consumed all reason. Nandi was dragged into the dungeons, her frail figure fading behind cold iron bars. Her heart shattered, but she knew her sin from that day had no escape. On land, Kwame's furious roar thundered through the palace, seeding terror in the hearts of his people. Beneath the sea, Malik's heart split between truth and love. Two worlds quaked at once beneath the weight of a single secret, as though the river itself carried not just water but the intertwined fates of both realms. In that moment, Yemoja sat beside Malik, her hand still resting on his shoulder. She knew no matter how long she had tried to shield him, destiny had unveiled itself. But would Malik choose to accept his bloodline and return to the land, or remain forever the child of the sea? And Kwame, blinded by fury, would he ever stop to see that his true son was not the arrogant boy of darkness, but the child he had abandoned, now grown within the light of the ocean? Two worlds, two truths, now laid bare. But once the veil had fallen, was there still a path to healing, or was war the only inevitable end? And now, my dear audience, stay tuned for the next chapter that will leave you in awe. Take a moment to like this video and subscribe, and leave a comment below telling me where you're watching from and what time it is. It is always fascinating to see people joining us from all around the world. That morning, dawn painted the eastern sky crimson, reflecting down onto the shimmering Niger like a vast mirror. On the riverbank, the thunder of war drums blended with the pounding of horses' hooves. King Kwame led a mighty army, his gleaming armor flashing in the sunlight, thousands of soldiers raising spears and shining bronze shields that blazed like a sea of fire. Tension hung in the air, as if a single spark could ignite the battlefield into a storm of blood and flame. From the depths below, a surge of blue light slowly rose, like the breath of the ocean's soul. The waves swelled high, then parted, revealing the majestic form of Queen Yemoja. The golden scales upon her body shimmered, her black hair streaming in the water, her eyes carrying both the calm of the sea and its hidden fury. She rose to the surface, facing the army of the land without the slightest fear. In that taut silence, Yemoja's voice rang out, gentle, yet striking straight into every heart. The child already has a name. He is Malik, and he belongs to those who truly love him, not to those who know only power. Her words were sharp as blades, piercing through Kwame's pride. The king roared, his voice seething with fury, echoing across the riverbank. He is my flesh and blood. Return him to me, or there will be war. The clamor of steel rang out in unison, like a vow of battle. Soldiers shouted, ready to charge into bloodshed, to satisfy their sovereign's wrath. The waters trembled, tides rising as though to sweep away such arrogance. And then, in that very moment, the river parted once more. From its depths, a young man emerged, his entire being radiant like the breaking dawn. His brilliant silver tail dissolved into strong human legs, each step borne upon the current itself. Malik's eyes shone clear, carrying the breath of the sea and the resolve of humankind. All fell silent, broken only by the drip of water from his hair onto the dry earth. Malik gazed directly at the man in armor, his father by blood, then turned to the trembling woman behind him, his mother by birth. His voice rose, steady and powerful, as though his words were meant not only for them, but for both worlds. You, my father, came here with swords and spears, not with love. And you, my mother, once chose fear over love. But through Queen Yemoja, I have lived. And I have known what it means to be protected, to be loved with compassion. His words cracked the heavens like thunder, and thousands of soldiers faltered in stunned silence. Kwame froze, his hand gripping the hilt of his sword, yet his heart trembled. In Malik's eyes, he saw the child lost for 15 years because of his own pride. Nandi broke into sobs. tears flowing like rain upon parched earth, finding its first stream. She collapsed to her knees, trembling hands reaching toward her son. Her voice shattered, broken, and anguished. "Forgive me, I was wrong. Wrong to be afraid, wrong for not having the courage to protect you." Kwame, the proud ruler who had never bowed before any force, slowly sank to his knees as well. His eyes burned with light, yet overflowed with regret, his voice breaking in the wind. "I, too, am sorry. I let pride blind me to love. I lost what was most precious, not the throne, but my own son." On the riverbank, the soldiers looked at one another, bewildered and silent. They had just witnessed the mightiest king of Obadera kneel before a young man. And they too saw the light radiating from Malik, gentle yet unyielding, like the sun pushing back the night. Umoja stood behind her son, her eyes filled with pride and sorrow. She knew, in this moment, Malik was no longer just her child, but the very symbol of reconciliation between land and sea. Yet still the question lingered, was love strong enough to erase the hatred etched so deep? The river flowed on, carrying with it secrets, sins, and hope. Before them, a new path opened, one where Malik's destiny would no longer be bound to darkness or threats, but to his own choice. That silence stretched as though it lasted a century. The wind swept across the banks of the Niger, carrying the dampness of the river and the metallic tang of steel from the spears brimming with killing intent. Every gaze fixed upon Malik, the young man who had just stepped from the water, standing between two worlds. On one side, his birth parents drowning in late remorse. On the other, the foster mother who had swallowed her pain to protect him for 15 years. In those radiant eyes there was torment, yet also a blazing light of choice that could no longer be delayed. Malik drew in a deep breath, as though gathering the strength of both land and sea into his heart. He knew, if he spoke one wrong word today, blood would dye the Niger red, and the wound would never close. But if he chose forgiveness, if he dared a path no one had walked before, perhaps both worlds could coexist. Malik's bare feet touched the sand, the boundary between water and earth. His voice rose, not loud, but each word sank into the souls of all who heard. "I forgive." A wave of whispers rippled outward. Thousands of soldiers held their breath. The merfolk beneath the waves fell silent. Only the pounding of hearts filled the air. Malik lifted his head, eyes shining with resolve. "But I will not return as a prince caged in gold. I am a son of the sea. I choose the path of peace." In that instant, as though an invisible chain had been cut, the suffocating tension eased. Thousands of spears lowered in unison, the waves grew gentle, and the morning sunlight flared brighter than ever. The war drums, once beaten to summon bloodshed, now resounded again, but their rhythm had changed. No longer the frantic beat of carnage, but the steady cadence of unity, of a new beginning. People looked at one another with unfamiliar eyes, but within them flickered the first sparks of trust. Kwame, once the sovereign, towering above all, now knelt before his son. His eyes brimmed with tears not only of shame but of pride, witnessing a strength of spirit he himself had never possessed. Nandi trembled as she stepped forward. She longed to embrace Malik, yet feared her belated love might wound him further. Behind him stood Yamoja, her face filled with both pride and sorrow, for she knew, from this moment, Malik belonged neither solely to the sea nor entirely to the land. He had become a bridge, a symbol beyond origins, to lead both worlds forward. Years later, when fire and hatred were only memories, Malik became a king revered by both realms. They called him the King of River and Sea, a name that recalled not only his extraordinary origins, but his power to reconcile two worlds once destined to clash. In the palace where the Niger's banks touched the ocean's depths, Malik did not build high walls of separation, but great gates open in all four directions, so that anyone from land or sea might enter freely. He did not rule with fear or might, but with simple words. Before each court assembly, he would remind his people of 3 short phrases: "I'm sorry," "Please," "Thank you." To him, they were not mere politeness, but keys to human dignity. To let pride not eclipse love, and fear not extinguish forgiveness. The people of Obadara learned to bow their heads and say, "I'm sorry," when they hurt one another, to say please to offer respect, and to speak thank you to treasure even the smallest kindness. Through these simple words, conflict faded, hatred no longer scarred generations. Children grew up never knowing boundaries of sea or land, playing together in the clear waters of the Niger, hearing tales of the past not to inherit grudges, but to learn compassion. The ocean sang songs of peace, while the land flourished, untouched by war's ruin. Some even said the very winds had grown gentle, carrying the serenity of 2 worlds that once nearly destroyed each other. And yet, though peace endured, people never forgot that moment when a young man stood between 2 worlds and chose forgiveness over hatred, peace over war. That story echoed through every generation, a reminder that true strength lies not in swords and spears, but in a heart that knows how to love. So, what about you? If you were Malik, would you have the courage to choose forgiveness to save both worlds, or let hatred cloud everything? On the banks of the Niger, as twilight descended, Malik's shadow stretched long across the still waters. People continued to recall the 3 simple teachings he had left behind years ago, teachings that allowed both land and sea to preserve peace. Yet, deep within the ocean, where light had never reached, hidden forces waited for their moment. Pairs of glowing red eyes followed Malik with envy and hatred. Today's peace was real, but was it eternal or merely a pause before the next storm? Malik's story leaves us with a profound lesson. Sometimes strength does not come from swords and spears, nor from the throne, but from the power of forgiveness and love that dares to overcome fear. Forgiveness does not make us weaker, it makes us strong enough to keep moving forward, unchained by hatred. And perhaps, in the ordinary course of our own lives, those 3 simple words, "I'm sorry," "Please," "Thank you," remain the key to healing and reconnecting hearts once torn apart. Yet, if the waves should rise again, if those who lurk in the shadows step forth, how will Malik face them? Can this fragile peace endure the trials to come? If you wish to continue following the second part of this story, leave a comment below, share your thoughts, and tell me if you were Malik. Would you choose forgiveness or revenge? Don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss the next chapter, for sometimes the true answer lies behind the door yet unopened.